Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the view from the opposition, and this week it comes from the Manchester Evening News's Joe Bray, one of the Man City writers down there covering the team from the Etihad. Joe, thank you very much for popping back onto the podcast ahead of the game at St James's Park on Saturday. How are you keeping? Are you well?
Not bad, thank you. City keeping us busy with a lot of news and a lot of stuff happening. But no, I'm always like coming up to St James's Park, so I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I'm hoping that the rain holds off, because the rain that we're currently experiencing at the time of recording, it is biblical. So the pitch is going to be an interesting test on Saturday, but I'm sure it'll be well prepared for the game. I want to start though with the big news of the week, and you probably know where I'm going to start. And it is the news that Rodri has picked up quite a significant injury. How will his absence affect Man City on Saturday?
It's absolutely massive, isn't it? And if he is out for the season, it's not been confirmed how long he'll be out. And I think there's a bit of hope that some tests are more positive than others. But if he's out for at least a majority of the season, it's got the potential to impact the title race and how many trophies City win. But I would also say that they've not had Rodri available for the first few games of the season and didn't have him available in the summer for pre-season because he obviously got to the final of the Euros. They gave him an extended rest. He had a bit of an injury when he came back. He's only started 2 games. He's completed 190 minutes in the Champions League. I think he's played about an hour of Premier League football before he got injured. So they've they've done what they've done so far without him, essentially, especially in the Premier League. It's a massive blow, and they were basically waiting for him to come back. But at the same time, they've had a lot of time to figure out how they want to play. And one of the themes of pre-season in the summer is, A, are they going to sign a player to help him? And they didn't. And then therefore, B, what is the plan B for when he can't play? He's made it very clear he doesn't want to play as every single game of the season. He can't. Now he's obviously out for a long time. They were going to have to look for a way to play without what is the best holding midfielder in the world, and this has sort of accelerated the plans. But yeah, like I said, they've had to be working on a plan anyway. So it's, as much as it is really significant that he's going to be injured for a while, it probably won't change too much how they've been playing at the start of the season.
So who comes in for him? Who's the man to replace him?
I don't think any one player can do that, and Guardiola has said as much. Mateo Kovacic is the man who's been starting a lot of games. We spoke to him in the summer, and he said he can play there, and he has played there, and wants to play in the holding role, but he can't do it on his own, and he likes having someone next to him. So Kovacic and Gundogan is a fairly safe option. Bernardo Silva, I really like when he drops back. You got Rico Lewis, who started the season really well, starting at right back, but barely playing there and drifting into number 6 area, even number 8 and false nine. He can play. So you think of the options who can drop back or step into midfield, and you do have a system that can work and can pick different bits of what Rodri does, and different players can contribute that. And I'm wondering if John Stones might play a bit more in defensive midfield. When City won the treble, that was his sort of big development, and in the Champions League final, he was brilliant there. Last season, injuries disrupted him a little bit, but I'm wondering if this could be maybe a time to say, right, John, you can go back and play a bit more in midfield, and not just as a defender pushing up, but as an out and out defensive midfielder, probably in a double pivot.
Because he's very good with the ball at his feet, isn't he? He can pick a pass, and we saw against Arsenal. I mean, I'm not sure what position he actually came on in, whether it was defence or midfield. I mean, he'll be able to tell me in a second. But obviously, he came off the bench when Man City was struggling to break down Arsenal, despite having the man advantage. So it's a good option to have with John Stones. But also the other man who's missing, and we were very thankful of this, because the last time he returned to action for Man City, it was against Newcastle United after he'd missed quite a bit of football. He came off the bench and turned the game on its head up at St James's Park, that 3-2 victory for Man City. The last game Newcastle actually lost to him was that game. It's Kevin De Bruyne. So another big star in the midfield who Man City have had to cope without.
Yeah, De Bruyne, I think, started 5 games in a row at the start of the season. He got injured against Inter Milan, didn't play against Arsenal or Watford in the Cup. I don't think he's been ruled out at the time of recording. I think at the start of the week he wasn't training and they were hopeful he might be back for Newcastle, but he's also the player that you don't want to rush back and you don't want to risk. So I'm sure Guardiola will offer an update, whether it's just we will see and wait and not give too much away. But I think he's not completely out just yet. But yeah, De Bruyne is someone who can win a game on his own, and Guardiola said as much, and Newcastle know that all too well. So if he's there and if he's fit, he probably plays and probably starts and probably does quite well for City. But yeah, they've he's another one where they've got options to play without, and Phil Foden played in 90 minutes in midweek and he's coming back to fitness. So they've it's the same with City, isn't it? You can lose one player, but I've just listed 5 or 6 replacements that can come in and do a job in midfield for Rodri, and you've got the best player in the league last season who can replace Kevin De Bruyne. So it must be a nightmare to plan, even with 2 of your best players potentially out.
Yeah, most certainly. So I think Premier League injuries.com has him as a 25% chance of playing against Saturday. But like I say, we're just scarred from the last time we had this. Will he play? Won't he play? Because if I remember correctly, in the build up to that 3-2 victory, I'm sure it was heavily hinted that he wouldn't be available. Then he was on the bench, and then obviously, like we said, he came off and turned the game on its head. So we'll wait to see what Pep Guardiola says, but then we'll probably wait to see what the team sheet is, because managers don't always tell the truth, do they? You mentioned there Phil Foden, who's been started on the bench, hasn't he? He's been kind of slowly bed back into the side after the Euros. But as you say, he's getting back to fitness. Will he play a big role on Saturday, do you think?
I would expect so. It's difficult to know the team because City obviously played Arsenal on the Sunday at 4:30 and then played Watford in the cup on Tuesday at 7:45, and through a sort of farcical set of circumstances involving United playing in the Europa League on the Wednesday and the police not wanting the 2 games on the same day. So City had to play 2 games in 3 days. So they rested a lot of players for the League Cup. Foden was one of those who started. I think that was the first game he started since the Euros final. I would imagine from Tuesday to Saturday he will be ready to play, but there was a lot of players who Guardiola left on the bench on Tuesday who I think will walk back in. It'll depend on De Bruyne. I can imagine Foden starting in the middle, especially without Rodri in sort of you'll need therefore Gundogan or someone to drop back. So if he doesn't start, he's definitely able to come off the bench. But yeah, he's been eased back into action. I think he had a couple of minor injury issues and he was ill for 2 or 3 games and that kept him out of England duty, but he is back and he was looking quite sharp in those central positions again. So it's good for City, maybe not for Newcastle.
Yeah, and you mentioned there the quick turnaround from the Arsenal game to the Watford game. Really intrigued by the fact that Kyle Walker started both games. I think did he do 80 minutes against Arsenal, then he played the full game against Watford. I mean, it's not something you always see, especially with the big teams. They tend to change it up a little bit. What was the thinking behind that? Because I'm assuming he'll be starting on Saturday against Newcastle.
I'm not too sure he'll start because Walker's had a bit of a weird season so far. Guardiola justified that by saying Walker came off after about 70 minutes, I think, against Arsenal. He played at centre back against Watford, and Walker basically said, and Guardiola said, "You're not going to be doing that much defending. Just stay as still as you can and don't do too much energy." And uh, he was the only one who played 90 minutes against Watford, who played so much against Arsenal. I think Doku started against Watford and was swapped at half time. So as much as Guardiola could, he did rotate, but Walker was sort of the spare player who had to play a lot. I mean, Rico Lewis has been brilliant and deservedly starting at right back. He didn't against Arsenal because Arsenal like to play with the wingers. But Lewis, whenever he's played this season and in the summer, has been really, really impressive. It His weakness is against sort of fast wingers, so you can appreciate why Walker would come in. But Lewis is just so intelligent. He will you'll see him in false nine position, and then the opposition will break, and suddenly he's back defending and ushering the ball out for a goal kick. he's started the season very well. So I don't think Guardiola will be too concerned if he has to rest Walker after his sort of exertions in the week, because Rico Lewis is doing so well, and he's a player that flies under the radar, I think. But he's got a couple of England caps now, and he's keeping Kyle Walker, who's the captain, out of the side, and it's absolutely deservedly so. So uh, I just love watching Rico Lewis play, and yeah, Walker has a job to do to win his place back. He will play a lot of games because of rotation and when he's needed to play against a fast winger. But yeah, don't look at if Walker is not on the team sheet. Don't look at that. I think great. This is good news because Rico Lewis is playing very, very well this season.
And there we have it. I think so I was very wrong to assume that Walker might start. I've got Rico Lewis in my fantasy team, so he's certainly on my radar. But it'll be interesting then, because you say there Walker started against Arsenal because they like to use the wingers. It'd be interesting to see how Pep Guardiola approaches Saturday then, because Newcastle United's strongest point is probably on the flanks with Harvey Barnes on one side, Anthony Gordon on the other. They might alternate, but at the same time, they're not going to have a lot of the ball. So how does Pep Guardiola look at Newcastle? Does he see the threat on the wings, or does he think, well, actually, we're going to dominate the ball in terms of possession? Newcastle are probably going to sit in and try and hit us on the counter. And I guess the answer to that question will then point to who he might start between, say, Lewis and Walker.
Yeah, it's difficult because I think when I've watched Newcastle in recent meetings with City, they've gone quite direct, and players like Joelinton, and I mean he scares Guardiola because he's powerful and likes to run through the middle, and but then you like you say the wingers you mentioned are very good players and dangerous, and it's it's going to be interesting. And I'm looking at the last few games that City have played. Brentford and Inter Milan were very, very good at sitting deep and compact, and then being really direct on the break, and particularly through the middle as well. So I think it's something Guardiola's got to look at. There was a lot of talk after the Arsenal game of how do you break down these teams who just put all the players behind the ball. City have been doing it for ages. Guardiola said that. He was saying it's not new that teams come to the Etihad or even at home and defend and look to get a chance on the break. I mean, even Watford did that and got a goal at the end in the not the Champions League, the Carabao Cup. So yeah, you can definitely hurt City on the break. They've been hurt a few times this season, sort of on the counter attack in the transitions, especially early on. They've conceded a couple of goals within the first 5 minutes. They've then gone on and battered those teams, but it isn't a team that you're not going to score against or that you won't get chances against. And if Newcastle are clinical and ruthless and quite fast on the break, they probably will have chances. And there've been quite a few end-to-end games between the two sides, especially at St James's in the last few meetings. So I can see something similar.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think in the last game that they lost 3-2, Newcastle, they did kind of come out of the traps racing and kind of really win City's faces. And I think that, I mean, I don't know that's it's not sustainable for a start, because City have got so much talent that they will just kind of get back into control and wear you down. But I think the way Newcastle started this season, I'm not confident that they'll be able to start the game strongly and take the game to City. Equally, I'm not confident that they'll be able to sit back and absorb the pressure and hit City on the counter, because they've not really done either very well this season at all. Against Southampton, they kind of had to dig in because they had a man advantage to Southampton. But with all due respect to Southampton, you can't really compare City and Southampton and the quality that they've got. So it's going to be interesting to see how Newcastle approach the game. I think if I was a betting man, it would definitely be absorb and try and hit on the counter. But we just have to hope from Newcastle point of view that Eddie Howe has managed to get into the heads of the players, give them a bit of a confidence boost, because the performances have been really poor. And the first half, especially against Fulham, if you play like that against City on Saturday, then it could be a scary, scary scoreline by the half-time whistle. The record at Newcastle, or the record against Newcastle, sorry, is rather alarming. City have won 27 of the last 33 Premier League games against Newcastle United, drawing 5, losing just once, and that was back in January 2019. So City come here with history definitely in their favour.
Yes, I think I don't know. I think at the Etihad it's always been quite one-sided, and we might build it up and think, oh, Newcastle are gonna have a go at City here, and it's just the nature of playing away at City is you are defending for 90 minutes, and City will often pick you off. But yeah, I think St James is probably where you're going to get a result more often. I was at the Carabao Cup game last year, and the crowd really got on side, and yeah, it was a much changed City side, and no Rodri, they had Calvin Phillips instead, but they were. It is possible to get at City, but it's tricky. Brentford and Ipswich have taken the lead against City this year at the Etihad, and by half time, City being ahead, and I mean I think Ipswich were 3-1 down after 15 minutes after taking the lead, so it's one of them. You don't want to anger them too early either, because there's a real sort of determination in the City side as well to win and get goals back if they've made a mistake and if they go behind. So there's I mean, you saw against Arsenal as well, it was a different kind of game where they were completely dominant in that second half. But there's just something in that squad that they never give up either. And I mean, I don't want to remind Newcastle fans, but that goal, that Oscar Bob goal in the last minute, effectively won City the league, because if they hadn't scored that, hadn't won that game, they wouldn't have won the title, and it sort of gave them a bit of a kickstart as well. So they will always be in the game, and it must be a nightmare to formulate a plan against, because even if you're a couple of goals ahead, and I think there's been a couple of examples at Newcastle possibly where you're thinking, oh, you know what, we're going to do this against City. City have then somehow just got one, and suddenly one becomes two and potentially three.
Yeah, it was that 3-3 draw. I think Kieran Trippier put Newcastle 3-1 up on a glorious summer afternoon, and then City managed to get themselves back into the game. And it's hard enough trying to come up with a plan to stop City. It's even harder when things haven't been going your way, as they haven't performance-wise for Newcastle United. Now, to an outsider, you might say they're sixth. They've got 10 points out of 15. Had they won on Saturday, they would have gone above City and Arsenal until the game on the Sunday afternoon. But performance-wise, it's been pretty poor, and there's lots of selection dilemmas for Eddie Howe. Will Tonali come in? Who starts at left back? Who starts at right back? Does he drop Anthony Gordon and bring in maybe Jacob Murphy? So, Eddie Howe is not only trying to find the game plan to beat Man City, he's also trying to do it by still struggling to pick his best side. I think the wings are interesting. The battle between Newcastle's fullbacks and Man City's wingers is going to be key. Again, it's splits. Anyone's guess. Will it be Kieran Trippier, Tino Livramento? Who are we expecting on City's left-hand side? Because obviously, whoever they play might affect Eddie Howe's decision.
It's a very good question, and I don't have an answer, because we were fully expecting Jack Grealish against Arsenal and maybe Bernardo on the opposite flank, and Guardiola going for the control option, and he went for both Jeremy Doku and Savinho, who are direct and take on the man, and if they don't win that challenge, they go again and they go again. Both of them played 45 minutes on Tuesday. Savinho, I think, is going to be a very good player in the Premier League. He's raw, but he loves to take on a player, and I think he got his first assist for Haaland against Arsenal. We were really pleasantly surprised when both of them started against Arsenal, because we were thinking this is going to be a basketball game now. They're really going toe to toe. I would like to see Doku and Savinho, because it's good fun and they're very good players and good wingers. But probably if you have that, you've got to defend, but they're not going to defend as well a lot either. They're not going to help the fullback. So again, there's chances to exploit that. If you've got Grealish and Bernardo, they are going to support whoever's at fullback, and it's a bit more controlled. But you're not going to see any of the ball, because they're going to keep the ball and wait for the space to open up, and they might wait 20 minutes, but it will open up and they will find that way. So yeah, I'm in a point where I'm just enjoying watching Doku and Savinho whenever they play, because we've not seen sort of fast, skillful wingers at City for a few years. But then whenever he plays Grealish and Bernardo, they're clever footballers, and they are the reason why City have won a lot in the last few years, because they are just so clever at what they do.
I'm a big fan of what I've seen of Savinho this season.
Mhm.
I mean, he just looks such an exciting player, and Doku as well since he's joined. He's the kind of winger that you just love to see. He gets you out of your
Mhm.
seat. But I guess whoever you had said there will start on the left. It doesn't really matter because if it is Grealish, if it is Doku, either one is enough to, I think, terrify Newcastle United fans and to terrify the fullback. If it's Kieran Trippier, I do worry about the pace that Trippier has. Will he be able to keep up with either man? Livramento has a bit more pace about him, but does he have that defensive organisation, defensive know-how as well as Trippier? His experience is there. Livramento hasn't quite got that. On the other side, you've got Lewis Hall, who is young, he's learning, but there are issues defensively with his game. It might be Lloyd Kelly, who didn't cover himself in glory against Fulham. He allowed Traore to run circles around him. So it's a horrible dilemma, I think, for Eddie Howe to have, because he's not necessarily picking on. He's not necessarily just picking in terms of a game plan to stop City. He's kind of picking on form as well. So
Mhm.
we will see. But I was impressed with Grealish when he came off against Arsenal. Came off the bench against Arsenal. I thought, when he was introduced, he gave them a bit more of an outlet down that flank, and he was a bit more. He was maybe a bit more direct than what we've seen with him in recent times. But trying to get the ball in the box, there was a dart down. I think, did he win the corner for the eventual goal when he went down the
Possibly,
left?
yeah, and
And I think
he took it and a 1-2 and got the ball into the
yeah.
box quickly.
Which was funny because the corner before that, the commentator had slated them for taking a short corner. Then they take a short corner and they end up pulling it back. It was an entertaining game, to say the least. We saw a bit of feistiness in that game. Was that because it was Man City Arsenal and they're going for the title, or is that because maybe Newcastle United, if they want an added advantage, maybe can try and get under the skin of City's stars, or was it just because it was the game against the title challengers?
I think you can get under the skin. There are occasions where there was a game against Everton last season or the year before where Haaland was just rattled and he was sliding into challenges, and it was the Haaland that we saw against Arsenal when actually normally he's just so calm and just does his thing. I think a lot of it was the rivalry with Arsenal. There was a lot said after the Arsenal came to the Etihad and played for a point and got it last year. Arsenal weren't happy with that from the first 3 seconds. Havertz clatters into Rodri and it was just bad tempered all the way. And even afterwards, we had Bernardo and Akanji and Walker slagging off Arsenal and the way they played. And it feels like they are two teams who really don't like each other, which is great. But I'm not sure it will be exactly the same. And it it was a quick turnaround in the Carabao Cup. It was never going to be going from the high of Arsenal to the Carabao Cup third round against Watford is never going to be the same. But I think that game was useful just to draw a line and move on and sort of go back to playing football rather than the boxing match that Arsenal turned into. But yeah, it was really good fun, and I'm as a neutral watching it and writing about it. It's good to see a rivalry where there's a bit of needle as well. It's nice
Yeah.
to see City and Liverpool try and out tactic each other and play like that, but you want a couple of tackles as well and a bit of bite and a bit of snarky comments in the media as well.
Yeah, certainly so. Big fan of Haaland's celebration and the ball bouncing off the defender's head. I'm sure he didn't mean to do it. But yeah, we've got like 25 minutes in this podcast and we've only mentioned him 3 times. I suppose we're going to have to talk about him, aren't we? Like, and he's just, as I said on our match preview, he's just an absolute different beast. Like, he's such a good finisher. He's going to catch Shearer's record if he continues at this rate the next kind of 2 to 3 years. I think I ask you this every time you come on the podcast, Joe. How on earth do you stop Erling Haaland?
You stop the balls going to him, but that is very much easier said than done. I mean, Arsenal in the second half put 10 players around him and he didn't get a sniff. Into Milan put 6 or 7 players around him and he didn't get a sniff, but City still got a point against Inter and a point against Arsenal and scored some goals. So it's one of them. If you stop him, it's one thing to stop Haaland, and it's clearly very hard to do that given he scored 100 goals in 105 appearances. But stopping the rest of the team because the resources that are needed to not give Haaland any space, you're taking away Foden and Grealish and Doku and Savino and De Bruyne and all of these players, and suddenly we've got Rico Lewis popping up in sort of next to Haaland, and it's a nightmare. I can't imagine it. And even like I say, these games where Haaland doesn't score, his record is crazy. That goal against Arsenal was number 100 for City, and I spent my international break watching all his goals, and yeah, you got penalties, you got quite a lot of finishes, just tap-ins from crosses, but he's always in the right place, and if he's through on goal, he very rarely misses. He's always got the right finish. And I think he scored against Chelsea at the start of the season. He said, "I remember I missed a one-on-one against Robert Sanchez last season, and I wasn't going to do it again." And he knew the exact finish, so he's got that attention to detail, and I think it's 10 goals in 5 games this season. He's definitely on a mission this year.
But only 1 goal in his 4 appearances against Newcastle. That said, he has won, I think, 3 of the games that he's played in. So, there are other players that can hit Newcastle. But clearly they're doing something right. But maybe that might be in the back of his mind that he wants to start scoring against Newcastle. But hopefully that kind of poor run continues. There must be, though, a weakness of Man City that Newcastle can exploit on Saturday. What is it?
They're probably going to be which will help. I think the early goals are a little bit of a concern for City. I can see potentially if Newcastle get an early goal, get the crowd behind them, you never know what will happen. And as much as I'm praising Rico Lewis and his sort of positional awareness, he does go on that runs up into midfield, and you got Josko Guardiola, who can be got at left back, another very good player, and can pop up in attack. But if you catch City on a bad day where just they've not got the defence quite right, and the balance between the fullback moving up and the other defenders moving into a back three, there are probably chances there. But I think I say fullbacks every year, and it's easier said than done, isn't it? To just put an all-out attack, because City can easily go up the other end, and as soon as you commit players forward and give space, then you're giving Haaland space at the other end, and that's the last thing you want to do.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, obviously Newcastle were meant to be playing Wimbledon in the League Cup Tuesday just gone. They haven't done because the game was postponed until next Tuesday. I mean, do you think Pep's looking at that and thinking, I can't believe they've had a free week to train? Or because he's talked about the schedule and the quick turnaround for themselves. I mean, look, it'll not be impacting his game plan probably at all. But do you think he would have looked at it and gone, that's kind of just our luck that game was postponed?
Maybe a little bit, but he's used to it. He's used to playing teams who have a full week to prepare. He said that in the past. He sort of made the point that we have a day or two to prepare for each opponent, and they can play teams who've played on the Saturday and then they're not playing till the following Sunday, and have a full week to rest and get a plan together. So yeah, it's probably a bit of a boost for Newcastle to make sure they're as fit as possible and have a plan to face City. But I also don't think it's not going to be something that Guardiola's too bothered about, because it happens so often.
But he's always so complimentary, isn't he, about Newcastle and Eddie Howe? And I think he said earlier this season that the Newcastle United we'll see this season will be the one that finished fourth a couple of seasons back. So he's well aware of the threat. I mean, is that just something that managers say when they're asked about certain clubs? They're never going to chuck managers under the bus, or do you think he genuinely does see Newcastle United as a bit of a threat?
There is a part of Pep who will praise every single club and pick out a couple of players because he's watched them on the analysis. But no, I do think he is wary of Newcastle, and I think he loves playing at the the proper English grounds, and where the atmosphere is great, and the fans are right on top of you. And I do think he likes the challenge of doing that and playing in these places against these teams. And yeah, unprompted at the start of the season, like you said, he mentioned Newcastle, and that's what I mean. He values the time to prepare for a game when you don't have European football. He often says teams like Newcastle, and I think there was another team last year who didn't have Europe, and he was always tipping them to do quite well. So yeah, when he talks about Newcastle, it is genuine, I think.
So just before I ask you for your score prediction, then just give me the player from Newcastle United that you're most looking forward to seeing, but also the player that maybe Pep Guardiola is really keeping an eye on and coming up with a plan to stop
I'll admit my knowledge of Newcastle this season hasn't been. I've not had a completely close eye, but I do like Anthony Gordon, and he's one of them where I sort of might have written off and thought, oh, he's not going to do that well, and then suddenly he's scoring all those goals, and then you think he's in the England squad, and you're like, oh, well, from afar, is that right? Is that fair? And then he does well for England, and he's definitely a player who's growing on me, and I'm looking forward to seeing him. And yeah, especially if he's up against, say, Rico Lewis, I think that'll be a good battle. Or if he's up against Kyle Walker, that's another great battle, because that's going to be a proper sort of foot race, and two England players going head to head. So yeah, I would say Gordon, but it's one of those teams where there are threats over the pitch. So it's just if Newcastle can get it right, I don't think it's confirmed or nailed on that City will get a win. I think they probably will, but it's not as simple as some fans might fear.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony Gordon needs a good performance, because he's had plenty of critics about the way he started this season so far. I mean, I fully believe it's going to come good, and Newcastle tend to raise their game against the bigger sides, and maybe with the world's TV cameras on them, certain players like Gordon might step up to the plate. And he performed really well in that 3-2 defeat last time out at St James's Park. I think he even scored one of the goals, if I'm not mistaken. He gave Kyle Walker a really good run for his money. So fingers crossed he can step up to the plate. Final question then, Joe. How's this one going to go?
I think 2 or 3-1 to City, potentially with Newcastle taking the lead or equalising and not making it easy for City. But by the end, they'll probably just wear you down with passes after passes, and Haaland will probably score another hat-trick, because that's what he does nowadays.
Yeah, so that's why he's my captain in my fantasy team. So if Newcastle do end up losing, at least I have that, and then sort of millions of others have that comfort blanket that Haaland has scored a few goals. But Joe, thank you very much for popping onto the podcast. I hope your score prediction is wrong, and Newcastle can upset the odds and get a victory over Manchester City this Saturday. Thank you to you guys watching. Do get into the comments, leave whatever you want to tell us about your thoughts ahead of the game in those comments. Hit a thumbs up, give us a subscription as well, and leave us a rating and review on the podcast channel. Head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the latest Newcastle United news, including Eddie Howe's press conference later today and our live match coverage on Saturday via our dedicated match day live blog. And for myself, I'll see you guys very soon.